So testing is important. We all know that. The challenge with testing though is their latency. You want testing to be part of your workflow, and that means a blazingly fast test environment. For jFlux, it was decided to use Node. With jQuery, Jasmine Node, and JS DOM, you can test both your unit tests and your UI in Node. Let's fire up our tests. I have used the recommended browserify setup, and that lets me run gulp test to run the tests. So let's do that now. Gulp test. Now it listens for changes to both my specs and my project files. And when they are changed, it will rerun all the tests. But currently there are no tests, so let's do something about that. Jumping into the project, I have added a utils file here, which just has a trim method. Now trim some text, kind of silly, but it's just to show you. So let's jump into our utils spec file and say it should trim text. And we have a test callback here. And as you can see, I've included jFlux, so we can use the jFlux test method, where the first argument is the path to the module I want to test. Now this path is relative to the project root, so I say app utils.js. And I pass a second argument, that is the callback that will actually run the test, and that will receive the module as its first argument, like that. And now we can just expect utils trim hello world to be hello world. I'm just doing it the wrong way just to show you first. Saving that, jumping into the terminal, and we can see here that it failed. Going back, fixing this, hello world, saving again, and we see it passes. You can also pass a second argument to the jFlux test callback. The second argument is an isolated jQuery instance with its own simulated DOM environment. If you include the second argument, the test becomes asynchronous in nature. Let's write a simple test. It should work in the DOM. It should work in the DOM. What we have to make sure of now is that in the Jasmine test callback, we have to include an argument. That's usually called done. That makes this test asynchronous. And we use our test method again, pointing to utils.js, and we get our utils module, and we also include jQuery, like that. So what we're going to do now is just create an element here using jQuery, a div that has some text using utils trim hello world. Let's have some spaces here. And then we can expect that L text to be hello world. Just like that. And we also have to end our assertions with done. Now we save that, have a look in the terminal, and as we can see, we have now two assertions that go green. Just to make sure you believe me, I can change the text here, check again, and it's false. And now it's back to green again. So you see how easy it is to test DOM content using Node, and the tests just run instantly. It's a very, very fast environment. Now let's test some jFlux code. We are going to test a button toggler, which I can show you here. It just toggles a checkbox when clicking it. And we need to jump into our toggler spec file, and we are going to write a test. It should toggle checked on button click, for example. And we have to use jQuery here, and as you remember, we have to use an asynchronous test. And we call our test method and point to app toggler.js. So what we want to test there is that when I click the button, the checkbox gets checked. So let's see, we want to pass our toggler and we want to pass jQuery. Okay, so what we're going to do here now is just actually render the toggler to the body. And we do that by using jFlux, toggler, and to the body. So when we include jQuery here, it's an isolated jQuery instance, but jFlux actually uses the same instance when you use other jFlux methods like render. So everything is handled in its own environment. So if I now use jQuery to find the button, I can just do it like this. I don't have to point to anything special because we're inside our own environment. And I want to click that button, and then I want to expect that the checkbox, which is in the body now, is checked, just using normal jQuery code. And that needs to be true. And then we call done at the end. And saving that, checking the terminal, we see that we have one test and one assertion, and it's going green. And just to verify that this actually worked, if we do not click, it's wrong. Okay, so it's also possible to stub dependencies of a module. In this case, our toggler, let's have a look at that, depends on app state. And what it specifically uses app state for is running the isChecked method. So notice the path here used for getting app state. We are going to reuse that in our test. Jumping back to the test, we will create a new one. It should be checked if app state is checked, for example, and it's asynchronous. So what we do here now is run our test method, pointing to the toggler as we did on the last test, but we're going to pass an object as a second argument. And this object is the dependencies in toggler. So specifically, we had the app state to just add the property just like that. And if app state was not a state, it was like utils, for example, which is just a bunch of methods, you could use a normal object like that. But since it's a state object, we have to wrap it in fake state. So it's the same thing. It's just an object, but we wrap it in fake state. And the reason for that is that states is not just an object. It has a special prototype and stuff like that, but don't worry about that. So what we wanted to do here is override the isChecked method. And what we want to do here is return true, so that when the toggler is added, it will get a true value for it for the isChecked method call. So that is our dependency override. And then we have our test that receives the toggler and jQuery. Okay, so what we do here is render the toggler to the body, and we can just run our expect right away, where we check if our checkbox is checked to be true. Oops, true. Just like that. Done. Saving that, jumping to the terminal, and now we see we have two tests with two assertions. And jumping back, we can change this to false just to show you that it still works. And we have two tests with two assertions, and we have one failure. And that's because we changed this to false. Changing it back to true, and we're right back where we started. By the way, the reason for two tests running here is because this is the current file, and these are all the tests. So you will get one for the current file and one for all the tests. This has given you some insight into testing with jFlux. As you can see, it is very easy to write your test as you mostly use jQuery. And as I said, it is an isolated instance, so it will not affect the other tests. And using the included stubber, it is also easy to isolate your modules or create conditions for the modules you are testing. So thanks for listening and good luck with testing.